Hello, welcome to my channel, Edible Thoughts Makes. My name is Stephanie and today I have a featured finished project video for you. The way I do these videos is I start with a project rundown, I share with you specifications about the pattern prior to purchasing the pattern, and then I go through my process and any modifications that I may have made from the original pattern. And then at the end, I share with you some styling options for the new finished garment. And oftentimes it is paired with other handmade items that I have from the last several years. Sometimes that might be ready to wear store-bought items, but oftentimes they are outfits that I have not yet worn out in the wild because I usually try to record these videos shortly after I finish making the item so that the details are all fresh in my mind. Ravelry project pages will be included in the description box below this video for any items that are knit or crocheted. Sewn items are not available on Ravelry. I do include closed captioning for all of my videos here, so you can click on that CC button. And also, if I speak faster or slower than your preferences, YouTube allows you to adjust the speed. Yarns, designers, things like that will also be linked in the description box below this video. I try to just link to their websites if they have them, and then you can find all their social medias and where to buy patterns and things like that from their website. The pattern I'd like to share with you today is the Rift by Jaq Cieslak. This pattern I have knit now 3 times, and I have made very different variations every single time. This pattern was released in July 2019. It retails for $8 USD. It is available on the designer's website as well as on Ravelry for purchase. The pattern is designed in a sport weight yarn at a gauge of 16 stitches by 20 rows. Recommended needle size is a US 8 or 5mm needle, but of course, use the needle size that works for you in your yarn that you choose with your tension, and how that affects the gauge can vary widely. Finished bust circumference ranges from 40 inches to 72 inches. The recommended amount of ease is 6 to 12 inches. The designer does make a note that you are, of course, free to choose whichever size you want depending on the ease you want, and then just pick the size that works best for you. Something I find really helpful is that the designer does mention who is wearing what size in their notes on the pattern page. That way you get a better idea of how that fit looks for a particular body with a particular pattern size. Video tutorials are included in the pattern, which can be really helpful if it is your first time using a particular technique, or maybe you just need a refresher. Those include picking up stitches for the underarm tab, German short rows, and the 3 needle bind off. The sweater is designed in a sport or DK weight, cotton, wool, or linen blend. Of course, you choose whatever fiber content works best for you. Just know that if you do alter the fiber content in your garment, that it may drape differently, it may hang differently, the fabric will just behave probably differently, and the amount of yardage can also vary. But of course, to each their own, be as creative as you want. I made multiple changes in mine, which I will talk about, and I'm excited to share with you how those affected the end result. Yarn requirements are provided in yardages and in meters, and also the amount of yarn needed in the sample yarn that was used. I really prefer having the yardages or meterage listed out per size because then I have a better idea of how much yarn I need for whichever size I pick. If I just have the information for the number of balls of yarn for the specific yarn that was used in the sample, that doesn't give me enough information because I often use a different yarn. And not only that, if it says 3 balls of something, I don't know if you're using like 5 grams of that last one, or if you're using the majority of that last one. And if I already know that I'm going to be modifying certain things, I want to know if I actually need to purchase that last ball of yarn. Designer also says that if you plan on knitting the long sleeve version of this tee, to add 15% more yarn to your size. I feel like 15% isn't enough for me, but I think this long sleeves are actually designed to be more fitted, and the versions that I've knit so far with sleeves all have roomier or more positive ease than the sleeves called for in the original pattern. So again, that's something to take note of if you do plan on making modifications that are much drastic from what the pattern suggests, that you may require a lot more yarn. The Rift is a lightweight bottom-up tee. There are 2 necklines provided, optional instructions for bust darts, or instructions for optional bust darts is what I mean to say. And you can do short or long sleeves, and there's a calculation for a custom fit bicep. I find that so important because just because your bust size measures a certain way does not necessarily mean that your bicep circumference is a certain measurement. And so just being able to have that information and knowledge and know-how for customizing a garment and figuring out how to do the math can be such an important tool to take into any garment that you make. The design has a cropped body and a split high-low hem in twisted rib. I love that little bit of detail, and I find that if you use a plant-based yarn that the twisted rib really opens up and creates kind of an air vent, which is wonderful for a warm weather garment because you get a little bit of more airflow. I can't remember if I mentioned the gauge earlier, but it's knit at a very loose open gauge, but of course that can depend on what yarn you use. It is 16 stitches and 20 rows over 4 inches of blocked stockinette stitch. Now because this is knit bottom up and it's a drop shoulder construction, the beginning is knit flat because you have a split hem, so you'll knit the front or the back. I can't remember which part of the split hem you knit first, but then you join in the round and then you knit the body section and then you split for the front and back again. I believe you knit the front first. You knit one side first and then you knit the other side, you join the 2 and then you pick up to knit the sleeves. All right, I think I covered all of the things I wanted to talk about regarding how the garment is made and all the numbers and all of that. So now we're going to go into my process and my modifications. The yarn I'm using is Pearl Soho June worsted. This yarn was provided by Pearl Soho specifically for this project. This yarn is 70% organically grown cotton and 30% linen. It comes in 164 yards for 100 grams. I brought a little bit of it here to share with you. This color is green finch yellow. It is a very round yarn. I'm hoping it will focus okay here. It is very, very soft. I didn't have any issues with it hurting my hands. I have now knit 2 garments with it at different gauges. The first garment I knit using US 6 needles, which is 4mm needles, and the second one here I used US 8 or 5mm needles. I think I prefer this looser gauge when knitting because it didn't hurt my hands and I just didn't get tired as much, and then the overall garment is a little bit lighter for the reason that I'm using less yarn because my gauge is looser. And then the other one has a denser fabric which results in a heavier garment. This yarn is very tightly plied. The ends do not come loose. I feel like a lot of times cotton or just plant-based yarns, the plies are really loose and you end up with a yarn that's very splitty. I had 0 issues with this yarn being splitty, which is great because I don't like working with splitty yarns. As I mentioned, this yarn is very round, which I think is excellent for anything that you want stitch definition, which I knew in this garment I was going to have stitch definition in the twisted rib and the twisted rib detail along the sides. So I wanted it to look extra crisp, which I feel like this yarn does a really good job doing. And also with plant-based yarns, they don't tend to want to shrink back up on themselves in the sense that they're just not elastic like wool is. So anything with ribbing is probably going to stay more open, and I feel like in my experience twisted rib stays more open and has that crisp line compared to a ribbing that has no twisted stitches. So this works in my favor here and is really good with a plant-based yarn because those stitches stay open, again creating that vent, which is good for airflow, and then being a heavier weight yarn, that amount of airflow with those bigger stitches actually works really, really well. So this yarn is, I described in a previous video, very springy, I guess. It's very strong. It's not going to rip at all if you try to pull on it. I'm going to see if you can hear the springiness of this yarn as I pull on it. Hopefully you could hear that and you didn't just see a blurry piece of yarn in front of you, although it was probably blurry anyway. This yarn is kind of linty when you're working with it. It wasn't as noticeable working with the white yarn here, but it was very linty. I chose this yarn because I wanted to make a warm weather garment and I wanted to make sure it was machine washable and something that I could throw in the dryer if I wanted to. And so when I finished, I did put it in the washing machine, washed it on cold. I did put in 2 dye catcher sheets and they didn't come out noticeably any color. Of course, this is a white garment, but I do have these contrast colors in it, and I just wasn't sure if it was going to dye the white part, which I would be very sad if it did, and there is no dye transfer onto the white sections. And my color catchers, I didn't notice any color on there either, but there could have been a little bit. What I did want to mention is I did put this in the dryer on ultra low heat for about an hour. I think I needed more than an hour for it because it's a garment that soaks up a lot of water. What I wanted to say is that the lint catcher was full of lint. It was a really pretty color. It was this like lemony, limey color, but there was a lot of lint. So I'm guessing over time with more wash and wear that the lintingness, the shedding of the lint will probably go down a little, but I don't know. It doesn't bother me. It's just something I wanted to mention. It was an observation. So the colors I used is Heirloom White, which I feel like when I was knitting with it looked way more white, but now that I'm wearing it, it does look a little more ecru or slightly cream, but definitely leans towards white. And then my contrast color is Green Finch Yellow, which is a cool toned yellow. It leans a little chartreuse, but definitely not as green. And so I knew I wanted something that looked crisp, springy, summery, bright, but something that was also easy to match with different things. And I had made another one that used color very creatively because I used yarns all remaining from previous projects. It was all the same base, but I did my split hem 2 different colors. So I did color blocking, I did striping, I played around with how the short rows were in how I did my colors. And so I wanted to run with that idea, but just in 2 colors for this one. And so you will see that it's very different from the original pattern, which used 1 color. I'm going to turn around so you can see what the back looks like. So once I split for sleeves, since it's knit bottom up, I added in my Green Finch Yellow and I did 2 rows of each color until I got to this short row section for the shoulder neck shaping area. And then I cut my main color and then continued in the Green Finch Yellow. I just love how this shoulder looks. So you actually start with the front section. I think I remember that now. So after you split for the sleeves, you do the front first. Or at least I did. I did the front first. And so I did one side all in the Heirloom White, and the other side I striped in the Green Finch Yellow shortly before I started the shoulder shaping. So I did 2 rows of each for that section. And then those stitches are placed on hold. And then I did my stripes in the back, and then I wanted my short row shaping at the shoulders to match the color that I did on this left shoulder. And then instead of doing my 3 needle bind off on the outside, which is what the pattern is written for, I did it on the inside just because I wanted it to look that way. And so then on this side, I have this crisp line between the 2 colors. And you'll notice that there's some gapiness in the sleeves. That's due to the short row shaping and using plant-based fibers, or in this case, it's completely plant fiber. They just don't really fill in the gaps as much, especially knit at a 16 stitch gauge. It's going to have some gaps and some unevenness in the stitches. And that's just something that I don't know, resigned is the right word, but I just accept it for what it is. I expect it, and so I accept it. It's just how it goes. When you knit with wool or mohair or something like that combination in the yarns, it can really fill in the gaps and blur and blend everything together. But I feel like when you use a plant fiber, everything is noticeable. Any difference in tension gauge is a little bit more noticeable. And so once I just came to accept that fact and tweak things as I can, I just go with it. Another thing to mention is that although I did get stitch gauge of 16 stitches for 4 inches, my row gauge was off. With plant fibers, I feel like the stitches tend to shrink. So my number of rows needed to get to 4 inches is going to be greater than what the pattern states. So the pattern was 16 by 20, I believe. And I think I ended up with 16 by 22 or maybe even 23. And And so I would need more rows to get to 4 inches. And that was fine. I just needed to know it ahead of time, and based on past experience knitting with plant fibers, I figured that was going to be the case. And then knowing that I was going to be throwing this in the washing machine and the dryer, that it was going to likely shrink up. So I did make a couple of adjustments in this top section just to make sure my armhole depth was still going to be deep enough, and also knowing what my body length was going to be ahead of time since it's knit bottom up. I just had to make sure I was really mindful of how long I was knitting that body section. I did knit it a couple of inches longer than the pattern states. I feel like the pattern is written for it to be pretty cropped, and I think I added 2 or 3 inches to the front and the back, and it still hits cropped on me. So the front ends a little bit past my belly button, maybe right at my belly button. So I'm wearing a linen dress underneath right now. I'll talk about that more later, but it hits right at my natural waist. And then I have the split hem here on the side. I knew I didn't want the split to be any higher than the top of my hip, so that's where it's at. And then the back is longer. The pattern states only 1 needle size throughout the entire thing, but I did use 2 different needle sizes. So for the main fabric, I used US 8, which is a 5mm needle, and then for my finishes and ribbing, I did a US 6, which is a 4mm needle. I did all my finishings a little bit different, aside from the bottom twisted rib split hem. Okay, now that I've talked about how I did my color placement, I will mention my sleeves. So you'll notice my sleeves are very different from what's written in the pattern. In the pattern, you just basically pick up around the armhole and knit a cuff. And if you want to do the long sleeve version, there's this very fitted sleeve, but I knew that I wanted the airflow and I wanted something with a little bit of dramatic flair to it. I feel like my stripes make it very sporty, but I wanted to juxtapose that with something a little more romantic and feminine feeling. And so I picked up way more stitches than is called for in the pattern, and I didn't even tell you what size I knit. I picked the first size, which would give me 8 inches of positive ease around full bust circumference, and it did block out to that size. So I picked up way more stitches. I used a US 8, and I picked up 1 for 1. So a ratio of 1 to 1 stitches. And I think my circumference ended up being closer to like 18 inches maybe. And then I knit until I was past the elbow. I didn't do any decreases until I was going to knit my cuff. So then once I got to my cuff section, I cut the main color, I joined my contrast color, and then I knit this ribbed section without any decreases, and then I knit 2 together all the way around until I got to the beginning of round again, and then I did a 3 stitch I-cord bind off. This is where I joined it. I thought this one was really tidy. There's no bump or lump. Hopefully it's in focus here. And so the way I knew it was going to be a comfortable circumference is I figured out what my final stitch count would be, and then knowing that it was going to be on a smaller needle size and something without stretch, I definitely wanted structure because cotton linen can tend to stretch out, and I didn't want this area where I'm going to be moving a lot to get all stretched or flared. And so that's why I chose an I-cord bind off for this part, and it mimics the neckline. So I calculated how many stitches I would end up with, and then I divided that with my stitch gauge, but then I subtracted about 1 inch or so, knowing I was using a smaller needle, and that just gave me a little bit of an estimate. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't going to be tight. So if I had a little bit of positive ease, that was totally fine, but I did not want negative ease there. And then it all worked out, so that was great. So I have a little bit of a puffy sleeve. I still have this beautiful underarm twisted rib that connects all the way down to the hem, and I think that looks really nice and polished. And then for the neckline, in the pattern, I believe it has you pick up and bind off knitwise. I really like this I-cord bind off. I actually had to do it, I think 3 different times, because the first time I picked up 1 for 1 everywhere, and then my back neckline was flipping because it wasn't tight enough. So the second time I still picked up 1 to 1 everywhere, but in the back, I think I did a decrease on the 6th stitch. So maybe I decreased like, I don't know how many times, but instead of knitting 2 through the back loop, I knit 3 through that back loop and then slipped my stitches back over. If you know how to knit an applied I-cord bind off, then hopefully that makes sense to you. And if you don't know how to knit one, maybe look up how to do an applied I-cord bind off with decreases, and hopefully that will explain it better. I really like how this lays. I also like that it's not going to stretch out. It fits over my head comfortably. I picked up with a 24 stitch cord needle, and it just looks so nice and polished, and it's not going to get stretched out, which again is something that plant fibers sometimes tend to do. It always shrinks back up once you wash it again and throw it in the dryer. However, just throughout a day, I want to make sure that it still looks nice and isn't going to be falling off my shoulders. The total yardage that I used was 453 grams, or about 743 yards for the entire project. Breaking it down into the different colors, the heirloom white I used 404.63 grams, but I actually just used 4 balls of yarn. They were all over 100 grams, and they come in these peanuts, so you don't actually have to wind anything on your own at home. I prefer to knit from a cake because I don't like to center pull, and if you pull from the outside on a peanut, it's like bouncing all over the place. And so I did wind my yarn, and all of them were over 100 grams, so 101 or 102 grams. And so in total, I used 404.63 grams. For the green finch yellow, I had used that in a previous project, and so I had some left over, and of that one, I used about 49 grams of yarn. So I'm so pleased with how this turned out. I actually initially had a different idea where I was combining more than 2 colors together, but then as I was knitting it, the idea kind of evolved a little bit, and this is what I really wanted it to be. And so this is the direction I took it, and I'm so glad with how it turned out. So now I'm going to turn the camera vertically, and I'm going to try on some different pieces that I have made. I pulled out 4, well, I guess including the one I'm wearing, 5 different pieces to share with you today on how I think this tee or garment or sweater, I don't know what to call it, is going to be worn. So this is what I have been wearing the whole time we've been talking, but you didn't get a full length view. So now hopefully you can see the entire thing that I've turned the camera vertically. I'm wearing the Rift over an orchard dress. This is the free pattern by Helen's Closet, a Canadian company that has both free and paid for patterns. I love their sewing patterns. If you've been here for some time on this channel, you will have seen me sewn multiple different garments from Helen's Closet patterns. I just like how easy they are to follow, and that they really give out the step-by-step instructions and tips and fabric suggestions, and they are very size inclusive, and every pattern comes with multiple different views. So this orchard dress is a free pattern, and it comes in different lengths. This one I made to be just above knee length. I made it to be a layering piece. The bias tape, I have this strawberry fabric on it all the way around, and this is a dusty pink linen. I do have these inseam pockets, and I really like how this rift looks with this layered outfit. The pants are just like an elastic waist, elastic cuff pant. I think my mom bought this for me, maybe in Taiwan. It's very loose, and I feel like I like how this ensemble looks. Okay, now that I'm standing on a step stool, hopefully you get a better view of how all these 3 layers look. Now I feel like a strawberry vanilla chocolate ice cream cone, but I feel like that kind of goes with summer, right? So this is great. I'm going to switch into the next one. The Rift now paired with another Helen's Closet pattern. This is a paid for pattern. It is the Lawrence dress. I've made multiple of these. I think I have 4. This one is color blocked with white linen on top, and then a flax linen as the center one, and then a sky blue tier on the bottom. So this ruffled tier dress has inseam pockets. I really like how the Rift lays on these tiered dresses, I feel like it isn't going in where the hips are and creating like an extra bunchiness of the ruffled fabric. Because it goes to the natural waist, I feel like the split hem flares out right where the ruffles of the dress end up with more fabric. So it creates a nice proportion that isn't extra bunchy or feels constricting or just feels like the fabric has nowhere to go. I feel like it's a good proportion of fabric. And I like how the colors are going here. The cream white color goes really well with this color blocked dress. And I feel like the green finch yellow gives it a really nice, crisp, sporty look. And then my nice big sleeves go with the femininity of this tiered ruffle dress. So this is so nice. I'm feeling very beachy in this outfit, like boardwalk, ice cream to go with my previous outfit of an ice cream cone. But I feel like this would be a great one for travel because if it got too hot, the sweater could come off. And it's also something that can be easily paired with different things and layered. I really like it. Okay, next one. Another Lauren's dress. This is made out of a golden linen. I have these cotton flannel pockets that have mushrooms on them. I feel like this golden yellow is more of a late summer, autumn vibe. And I just wanted to pull it out to see if this garment could transition into like early fall. And I definitely think it can, just depending on what color it's paired with. I feel like early fall time can still get really warm, but it's definitely cooling down. So this type of garment on top may be that perfect layer for those early mornings, later evenings, or even during the day if there's a cool breeze. I feel like this would be really comfortable. So this Lauren's dress is all in one color as opposed to the one I just showed you, but I do like this solid pairing with this rift as well. Okay, on to the next one. Okay, this is a self-drafted skirt, no pattern. It's an elastic waisted skirt and it kind of borderlines pencil and A-line. It goes straight down, but it looks slightly A-line because the top is elastic. It also has inseam pockets. This is a cotton linen coca fabric. I purchased this fabric as a remnant in a fabric store in Japan. Maybe medium to heavier weight cotton linen fabric. And there's these sheep doodles all over it. And I just love how whimsical it looks. I kept part of the selvage on the side to remind me of the fabric. So that's really fun. It says sheep and coca. So I thought I would pull out something that was a print. The rest of the items are all solid or color blocked. And given that the top just has these stripe details, it's a pretty easy one to pair with other items that are print. And this color, I feel like goes really well with it. This olivey green with the taupey ecru sheep, I feel like gives it a very whimsical, fun look to it. I feel like this is something easy to wear to anything. Farmer's market, fiber festival, really anything. I feel like this is a very easy outfit to throw on and it looks really put together, but is also super comfortable. I feel like this outfit looks very put together, yet also so easy. Not saying that to look put together, it has to be difficult or uncomfortable, but rather saying you can be put together or look as put together as you want to be, and it can still be something that's really easy to do. I hope that made sense. I feel like that made way more sense in my head than spoken out loud into words. So hopefully what I was trying to say came across in some way that made a little more sense. Okay, last one. and watched some of these featured finished project videos for other garments, you may have anticipated that my lovely neon green pants would come back. This is a pattern by Helen's Closet. It is the June pants. I have made so many of these, and these neon green pants have been way more versatile than I ever imagined. I had a vision for neon green pants, and I've always wanted a pair of bright green pants. I think initially I envisioned them to be more Kelly green, but they came out more neon green, and I'm totally okay with it. And honestly, surprisingly, the neon green goes with a lot of things. It is definitely something that falls into the realm of neon and neutral pairings and that big pop of color. As long as I pair it with other things that are a little more neutral, I feel like it still stands out, but it doesn't look out of place. In fact, I feel like it gives me that extra boost of confidence that sometimes I want, and there are other times where I don't maybe want to stand out so much, but when I reach for these, I definitely feel a different sort of energy, and it's a very positive one, and I just love it. I am really enjoying these green pants with this rift tee. I feel like the green finch yellow, which I think might be showing on camera a little warmer than it actually is in person. It is cooler in person, a little more chartreusey, but it can definitely look different on different screens. But I feel like this cooler yellow goes really well with this neon green, and then the neutral really gives it a canvas to wrap everything together and create like a resting spot. I feel like this outfit feels very fresh, but I just feel like it feels very natural maybe. I feel like I could easily wear this to an art fair. And then I have sun coverage because these are full-length pants, more coverage in the arms for sun as well, but I still have these air vents on the side from the twisted rib to stay cooler, and I would be wearing probably a big sun hat with this, and then maybe one of the core belt bags, the crossbody bags that I have made, and off we go. So yeah, this is super comfortable. I'm so pleased. Okay, that is everything I have to share with you today on this Rift by Jaq Cieslak. Hopefully I demystified some questions you might have had regarding the process of making it, and I hope you gathered some inspiration from my modifications and from my different outfits that I pulled from things that I have made in the past. And maybe you found out that it was something that you didn't want and wouldn't suit your preferences, and that's totally okay too, and I think that information is also very valuable. If this is something that you wish to make, I would love to hear what your plans are, maybe what colors, what modifications, how you might wear it for yourself. With that, cheers to being creative, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye!